We all expected week four of college football to be exciting, and it did not disappoint. Today, we're taking a look at the 10 best performances in our weekly power rankings and take a look at the teams that showed out in a good way. Let's start with the Alabama Crimson Tide, a team that needed to bounce back after a struggle of a game against USF. This is a team that is still looking to find its identity offensively, a defense that plays really well, but the offense just hasn't been up to speed to what they want. The quarterback position remains a position of note, a position to watch. Same with the offensive line, and they took care of business when they needed to against Ole Miss. Still wasn't the prettiest result, but this is a team that needed to win and got that. They held Ole Miss to just 10 points, and they, like I said, took care of business. It wasn't the flashiest win. It wasn't the best win we've seen in Alabama history, but it was a win nonetheless. And this is a team that still hopes to be in the SEC championship race, and getting a win like this is a good way to get things going. In what was going to be a defensive battle, Penn State ran away from Iowa, and that shouldn't be too surprising. From what we've seen from both teams, Penn State was clearly the superior team. This is a team that is really running well on the ground, and their defense continues to do exactly what they need to do. They allowed just 76 yards of offense to the Hawkeyes, an Iowa Hawkeyes offense that continues to struggle mightily. And that's something we'll talk about later in a couple other videos. But right now, Penn State appears to be ready to compete with the Michigans, with the Ohio States of the Big Ten East. Now, you're looking at Drew Aller as a big factor in that. 166 yards and 4 touchdowns. Maybe not the best statistical game, but he took care of business against an underrated Iowa defense. Iowa's defense continues to be one of the more stifling groups, and Drew Allard was able to find some success against them. So a good win for Penn State and a good way to build some confidence in a tough win. Kansas is 4-0, and the win over BYU tested them, that's for sure. Jalen Daniels had a solid game, 184 total yards, 3 total touchdowns. A 38-27 win showed that they have the resiliency to play a tough team and come back when they need to. They were up for a lot of the game, and BYU would not go away. BYU pulled within a touchdown, and Kansas responded with a nice drive to be able to put this game away. Kansas continues to have one of the more exciting offenses in college football, and it's because Jalen Daniels is healthy, and it's that's the biggest reason why you're excited to see a team like Kansas. Now you have a big test coming up against Texas next week, and that will tell us kind of where Kansas actually stands in the conference. But right now, the Jayhawks are playing really well, and they found a way to beat a BYU team that just stunned Arkansas last week. I don't know if you necessarily can call this an upset if you're a fan that's paid attention, or a college football fan that's paid attention to Marshall and Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech appears to be on the way down. Marshall is one of the better teams in the group of five, and they took care of business. And Rachino Lee, his return to college football has been really fun to watch. Had another strong performance, 174 yards and 2 touchdowns. Marshall is a team to keep an eye on in terms of the race for the New Year's Six, with the AAC seemingly down. It's kind of up to the Sun Belt and the Mountain West to take that spot. And Marshall is definitely a team that is in the running for that. And this is, again, a Sun Belt conference that is full of talented teams. It is a deep conference that could be really fun to watch. And Marshall is one of those teams that can win big games and now finds themselves with a ton of confidence on both sides of the football. Oregon manhandled Colorado this weekend, and it shouldn't be too surprising. Anybody who looked at this game objectively saw this coming. And at the same time, it's a reason why Oregon comes in at number 6 and not higher up in these rankings. It was an impressive win, but it wasn't unexpected. For some people, it might have been, but for most people, it wasn't. Oregon took care of business. They held Colorado to just 21 yards in the first half, and they held them to 199 total. This is an absolute dominant performance on both sides of the ball. For a while, Oregon just did whatever they wanted offensively. There was nothing stopping them. Colorado had no answer, and then Colorado couldn't protect Shedeur Sanders. So Oregon was a nightmare to face for the Colorado offense and the defense as well. And like I said, they took care of business. A strong performance from the Ducks, and a reminder that they are one of the teams to beat in the Pac-12. Northwestern was down for most of the game against Minnesota, but they found a way to come back and win in overtime. A 37-34 stunner at home was surprising, and I think the biggest thing we took away from it is Ben Bryant can play really well when he needs to. 396 yards and 4 touchdowns through the air. Bryce Kurtz, his favorite target, 215 yards and 2 touchdowns. The fact that they were able to come back late in the game too shows the resiliency of this team, a team that is going through quite a bit with the firing of Pat Fitzgerald. I think that there's a lot going on off the field, and the fact that they were able to pull this together as a team and stun the Golden Gophers says a lot about this program. Utah had an absolute dominating performance defensively against UCLA. They did not allow hardly anything, and they even scored a touchdown of their own. Now their offense has to figure some things out, but this was a strong statement win for them. UCLA's offense was a very strong group, even with Dante Moore, the freshman, running the show. This is still a group that is very fun to watch, and Utah essentially shut them down. They did not allow hardly anything. 9 yards rushing for the Bruins in the game, and even though they only had 219 yards of themselves, Utah's ability to shut down UCLA was probably the biggest storyline that we're not talking about more. Utah's defense continues to prove that they are one of the best units in college football, and this performance showed exactly that. It wasn't the prettiest result, but Ohio State got it done on the road against Notre Dame, a 17-14 win with a game-winning touchdown as time expired by Chip Trayanum, and I think that this is an Ohio State team that is tough. I have maybe some questions going forward about where they stand in terms of being a national championship contender. They did beat a really good team. Notre Dame's defense is one of the best in college football, and Ohio State took care of business. And for a while, they were without Marvin Harrison Jr., but there were other playmakers that stepped up. Emeka Ibuka had a solid game, 7 catches, 96 yards. Travion Henderson reminded us how explosive he can be, and the defense did its part. They took care of business, and they were able to help Ohio State survive. And ending this game with a win obviously is huge, but I think that there's also some things that they need to work on. Obviously, Ryan Day knows that, but the fact that they were able to go into South Bend, where most people, including myself, thought that the Irish would win this game, to pull out that win says a lot about this team. Washington State and Oregon State was one of the more underrated matchups this weekend, and Washington State absolutely took it to Oregon State early on. I think that this was a game that felt like it was out of hand, 35-14 at halftime. Oregon State obviously made a little bit of a comeback, but it wasn't enough. Washington State was able to hold on thanks to the passing attack. Cam Ward continues to shine in this offense. The Cougars expect a lot big things from him, and he has proven to be the guy for the job. 404 yards and 4 touchdowns this weekend. His favorite targets, Kyle Williams, transfer from UNLV, 174 yards and 1 touchdown. Josh Kelly from Fresno State, 159 yards and 3 touchdowns. Just another valuable experience that you can get when you add from the transfer portal, and you add not only depth, but you add talent, that when a guy like Lincoln Victor goes down and doesn't play, you have other guys that can make big plays. Florida State showed that it turns out that going into the transfer portal could give you the difference, and it gave them a 31-24 win over Clemson in overtime. We saw a number of transfers make a big impact for this team, and Jordan Travis was one of them, the former Louisville transfer, 289 yards and 2 touchdowns. Keon Coleman, the former Michigan State transfer, 86 yards, 2 touchdowns, including the go-ahead touchdown in overtime. Two guys that are absolutely phenomenal at what they do, and it was really fun to watch this team put it all together. And Clemson obviously is still a good team. I don't think we can take that away from them. They pushed Florida State in a way that we hadn't seen quite yet, and Florida State found a way to win this game, and an impressive win on the road in Death Valley too. I think that Clemson gave them everything they could, and then some. It actually was a pretty good performance for the Tigers. I felt like the offense played pretty well. It's just that Florida State was just that a little bit better. And I think the biggest thing that we learned is that Mike Norvell found a way to get his team to have a strong second half performance in a close game, in a big game, something we hadn't seen from his Memphis Tiger teams back when he was at that program. I think that's a big thing to be able to show that this team all of a sudden can play in the second half. And you saw that against LSU too. This year, we're seeing them take a step in terms of resiliency to be able to find ways to bounce back and make things happen. It was a huge win for them, and it gets them out of that tough September. Not that the ACC isn't difficult at all, because there's plenty of teams that will give them a run for their money, but we've seen them survive their two biggest tests, and now they can focus on the rest of the season.